Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. I am obviously not Liz Wheeler. Liz is out sick today, so make sure you keep her in your prayers. My name is Gary Melton, and I can be found across all platforms at Paramount Tactical. Well, we got a lot going on in the U.S. today, and we're going to try to cover at least some of it. One of the biggest things that we continue to see is this trend of transgender violence across the United States. It's something that we've all identified, and apparently the media, as well as the medical industry, continues to deny this. We're going to be diving into that with Steve Deace, who will be on very shortly, and we're going to talk about the immediate as well as the long-term implications of what's happening from a medical standpoint as well as a political standpoint. And also, did Barack Obama just confirm that there are aliens? We'll be talking about that as well. All right, so just yesterday we had another instance of transgender violence where a one Robert Dorgan, who identifies as a woman, allegedly went to a hockey rink, shot his ex-wife, shot one of his children, and his ex-wife's parents as well, both of which are now in critical condition. You can see Robert Dorgan here, who also identifies as Roberta Esposito. And the correlation between mass shooting and transgender can no longer be denied. And we can't even find any information on studies of transgender and violent crimes. So there could be a much larger issue here. And we're going to be getting into that with Steve Deace in just a few minutes. But before we do, if you've been waiting for the right time to stock up, this is it. Right now, All Family Pharmacy is running a President's Day sale with 47% off the most requested medications in America. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, NAD+, and many others. And this is exactly what Family Pharmacy was built for: people that want options, people who want to be prepared, and people who don't want to be told, sorry, you're going to have to wait. You don't have to sit in a waiting room. You don't even have to argue with your doctor. You don't have to jump through hoops. You simply go online, fill out a medical form, a licensed doctor reviews your request, writes the prescription, and your medication ships straight to your door. No coupon required. This President's Day sale runs through Tuesday, February 17th, and when it ends, the price goes right back up. So don't wait. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz and grab the 47% off while it's still available. All right, so let's go ahead and bring Steve onto the show. Steve, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on today.
You bet. Thank you for having me. Hope that Liz is feeling better soon.
Yeah, I do too. So, Steve, we see what's going on here in the United States. We have a very obvious trend that I think most of the media wants us to ignore. I mean, we can go back all the way up to Sochi Mosley, September of 2018. We have three victims that were killed. Alec McKinney, victims. We have one person killed, 8 injured. Anderson Lee Aldrich, and the list goes on and on when it comes to a clear correlation between transgenders and these acts of violence. And these are just the ones that are considered mass shootings. What I've not been able to find is any sort of statistics that show us violent crimes and transgender. That's not something you can find anywhere. So what's going on in the U.S. and what can we do about it?
I think that, and I say this as someone, my wife is a therapist. And so if she was here, she would agree. Gary, we're beyond mental illness with this. I think that we are. This is Island of Dr. Moreau kind of experiments on human beings. I think it is where the human species is here to serve an ideology, not an ideology to serve humanity. And I think we are dealing with cosmic and spiritual forces here. We're tinkering with the most innate aspects of the human identity. The first thing that is ever pronounced about every person when they're born through all of human history is it's a boy, it's a girl. It's the first biological fundamental fact stated about all of us that have ever lived on this planet, the billions that have. And we have decided that we're the people we've been waiting for, that we can be like God, and that we can open up the hood here and tinker with wiring and programming of the human soul that goes way beyond our knowledge and understanding, and comes from our Creator. And I think that now we are living through the very tragic consequences and circumstances of doing so.
Yeah, it would seem to me that what we're doing is, number one, not addressing a mental illness. We're actually promoting it and affirming that mental illness. And then on top of that, what they've learned is that they can monetize it, right? Instead of addressing it and treating it like we would do with anything else. If I decided that, I was a bird and not a human being, you wouldn't tell me, well, yeah, that's right. Go jump off that building over there and you'll be able to fly. So they're monetizing this because they see that the cure doesn't make them as much money as all this gender affirming care. And we get into surgeries and everything else. And on top of that, you take this person that is mentally ill, and then we're pumping them full of hormones that we know are going to make them emotionally unstable. And I think between that and then a society telling them that, the rest of the world is against you is just a recipe for disaster.
I mean, I think you did a very effective job of kind of quantifying my meta thesis there. So the sort of the metaphysical origins of this that I alluded to, what does that look like in the practical world and in which we live? And I think it's all the symptoms that you accurately laid out there. And I think that there's only one thing, as far as I know anyway, there's only one thing that overcomes a monetary or fiduciary motivation, and that's a criminal one. And I think that we're at the point now that these surgeries ought to be criminalized and outlawed, cradle to grave. I think that, just as we took, frontal lobotomies and shock therapies, there have been all kinds of treatments in the mental health space that we have learned more about and realized, that's probably not the end result we're looking for here. So I'm not even arguing anything that's all that radical. There's all kinds of things we've done in the mental health space in particular that we recognized wasn't working and ended up borderline being savagery. And so we got rid of those. We stigmatized them. And I think the same thing needs to happen here. And I think unless we do that, we're going to continue to have people for ideological reasons, a desire to subvert morality and gender identity and sexuality for their own color revolution and their own, ideological schemes and ambitions, and then the fiduciary monetary responsibility that you just described. And so I think this is now where we have to punish this evil, and I think we have to just make it illegal. You can't do this. I mean, we would say nothing if a doctor said he could take your child from you and give it to days of electric shock treatments. We'd all be shocked. Well, 100 years ago, they would not have been shocked. In fact, parents would have offered their kids up for such things, thinking they might have helped. Right? 70 years ago, your physician had a favorite cigarette brand that he recommended to you. I mean, there's all kinds of things we later realized, wow, that was dumb. Let's not do that anymore. And the consequences were extraordinary. This is that and beyond. And I fear we're going to have more dead bodies and we're going to have more funerals that didn't need to happen until we come to this conclusion.
Yeah, not only do we have patients that are obviously sick and then being hijacked for financial reasons, but they're also being used for political gain as well. Mm-hmm. That is something that we're seeing across the board. So they're getting a lot of bang for their buck, if you will, and they're pushing this through political as well as the financial and the medical side of it. And look, we know, I mean, there's plenty of studies now that are showing the actual damage that's being done by this. And then on top of that, what you have is a media that's trying to cover that up. I don't know if you have those slides available that we can show where, we have different media time and time again talking about, hey, it is not a trans problem. You're bigoted if you think this. That's something that we're constantly seeing and is just completely denied and ignored and covered up by the mainstream media. But we just recently saw a peer-reviewed study out of the Journal of Sexual Medicine, and they had some extremely interesting results that I think at this point we can no longer deny the damage that the medical industry is doing to what's mostly kids. They just did a study, had 107,000 patients with gender dysmorphia. Individuals who underwent gender-affirming surgery showed significantly higher risks of severe mental health conditions compared to match controls who did not have surgery. Depression for men was 25% versus 11% the non-surgical intervention. Surgical intervention with anxiety is 12.8% versus 2.6%. Among females, 22% versus 14%. Anxiety, 10% versus 7%. Elevated depression risks, increased substance disorders. Suicide ideation increased approximately 1.4 to 2.4 times, not percentage, times. Substance use disorder increased from 2.7 up to 2.5 times in some groups within the 2-year post-surgery. Body dysmorphia disorders rates were similar between surgery and non-surgery groups. But we see that gender-affirming care And these trans surgeries are just clearly doing more harm than good. And yet we're still continuing to see people push these things.
Because the ideological agenda matters more than the human condition. And, in another era, when non-traditional forms of sexuality were not as normalized as they are today, they would maybe have an excuse and say, well, of course people want to believe they're born in their own body. They have these same-sex attractions and desires, and society frowns down upon that. And they're trying to escape, your narrow-minded, bigoted Judeo-Christian views of sexual normalcy. And so they're changing their gender to align with their desires, except they don't have that excuse. Because we're living in there's never been an era in the history of the West where homosexuality, same-sex attraction, same-sex relationships were more normalized than they are right now, including large pockets of our own side on the right. These are normalized. So that means there's zero point, to quote the great prophets over at Animal House, 0.0 reasons to be doing this. There are no valid excuses to be doing this. If someone is a woman attracted to other women, they don't need to become a man. We live in a society where we're totally fine with you just going ahead and carrying on with another female. So then why do this? We've already overcorrected the sexual standard in the direction that they want to go, that would render these sociologically and culturally moot. So then why continue to do this? It goes back to what you said, the financial incentive. But I think even stronger than a financial incentive, brother, this is religious-esque dogma. Yeah. This is driving an agenda. This is an attempt to subvert all the norms of Western society in order to redefine it.
Yeah, right here we have the Journal of Sexual Medicine where that study actually came from. Folks, look that up. I think it's important that we understand this. We understand what's going on, and we understand what's behind some of this stuff. Politically, what do you think the end goals of so many pushing this? What does it ultimately come down to?
I think it's to completely redefine Western civilization, to get rid of every last notion of Judeo-Christian biblical normalcy within the culture, in order to redefine it in the way and to reshape it in the way they see fit. I think it's an opportunity. Within the human heart, we have two often competing, dialectics. The human heart is almost its own Hegelian dialectic, all right, with the antithesis versus the thesis here. And on one, we want to shake our fist at God and claim, no, that we are masters of our own domain. And then on the other hand, we desperately desire to be known by him at the exact same time. And so I think that this is an attempt to absolutely shake our fist at God, that we know better. You made mistakes. You put me in the wrong body. I dictate terms to you. You don't dictate terms to me. And other than God, now it's several space bars down the list. But next to God, the second most potent power and force on this earth is government. And so if I cannot get God to justify me and my desires and the way I want to live my life, then I will go get the second greatest power on this planet to do so, and give me the affirmation that I seek. And so much of what the left has done in our country is weaponize desire, identity, and affirmation. And I think at first they did it cynically, believing that they could just utilize these impulses in order to gain political power. And I think that's what the original boomer generation was doing, kind of just wink and a nod. And we still live pretty traditionally moral lives, but we're going to go ahead and utilize these almost like stormtroopers or frontline soldiers in a culture war. But we're in a new generation now, and the true believers are in charge of the Democratic Party now, are in charge of the left now. And so these aren't just cynical terms or cynical ploys to gain power. This is true believer, articles of religious faith kind of stuff now.
Well, I think we see also like this insertion of moral relativism too, right? So, and just relativism in general. When you can sit there and say up is down and down is up, and a man is a woman and a woman is a man, like everything is open to interpretation. And I think that is one of the things, like facts aren't facts. You have your truths, I have my truths. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest, most confusing things especially for kids growing up today, where they've been exposed to that their whole lives, where logic and reason is just completely abandoned, because whatever they determine the reality is, that's what they're going to go with, whatever they feel that reality is. And we see that all throughout our society. And
that is ultimately at the heart of every leftist scheme, whether you want to call it Marxism, progressivism, whatever liberalism, whatever iteration or manifestation that you refer to it as, at the heart is a desire for power and control. Everything that is done on that side is always for power and control. Empathy is weaponized for it. The English language is edited for it. Certain behaviors are affirmed and others discouraged for it. Everything is done for power and control. And so the opportunity to normalize this and the opportunity to get your children, there's a great graphic out that I shared in my feed today at Steve Deace Show, and I titled it Siri, Show Me a Social Contagion. And what it essentially says is that if you were born prior to the year 1980, no one was quote unquote transgender. No one was. And that a lot of this, so this is a social contagion. We pollute the airwaves with it. We litter our channels and feed with it. Then we incentivize it so we can get then more of it, right? We saw lots of evidence of this during COVID. You just want to kill grandma, go home, save lives, get your booster, wear your mask. Then it moved on to put on your Ukraine flag. Then it was your pronouns. These are all subversive opportunities in order to gain more power and control. And so if you can get people to completely redefine their reality and then convince the people around them to do the same, if you have control of what people claim is reality in and of itself, that's kind of ultimate power and control at that point.
No, 100%. And, again, we can look at these numbers right here. LGBTQ identity among the U.S. public. Let's see. Gallup reports 9% of U.S. public IDs are LGBTQ, but what an age gradient. And you can see the other thing that we see in schools and everywhere else is there is some, it's now become cool. It's now, encouraged to be gay or lesbian or whatever spectrum of the alphabet team that you want to be on there. And it gives you special treatment. Again, it's encouraged. And that's what we see time and time again, where, these young kids are growing up so confused, not understanding what reality is. And it's clearly intentional.
Yeah, the left doesn't care about these people, these kids. They're political chattel / capital to them, because ultimately, what they want to do is disturb the created order that established Western civilization and replace it with a new one. They would call it progressive. I would call it pagan. That's probably a topic for another day. But yeah, in many respects, the old progressivism is just the new progressivism is just the old paganism, just rehashed and refurbished, right? But that's what these kids are, just nothing other than but chum in the water in order to be pawns on a chessboard so that the powers behind this can get the power and control that they want. And they see those of us who believe in God, particularly the God of the Bible, who believe in the traditions of Western civilization that our society itself was inspired by and founded on. They understand that we are we're the bulwark, to borrow a term here. We're the bulwark against them. We're the last line of defense standing in the way of them having total hegemony and conquering what's left of the remnant of Western civilization. And so this is an attempt to weaponize our own children against us in order to accomplish that final objective.
Yeah, I mean, when you can convince people that objective realities don't exist, anything's on the table. And it makes
the old Marxist line, the sky is green, essentially. Yes, exactly.
What do you think? Look, I really do believe that a lot of these kids and people that are suffering from this mental illness are being weaponized. They're being pushed. And we see that online. And then we see other elements. We just recently had the Charlie Kirk assassination and what's going on with Tyler Robinson and, his boyfriend, Lance Twiggs. What do you think is some of the driving force behind that?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the online thing, because this is something I've been talking about the last couple of years. I would argue, Gary, that TikTok has been the greatest curator of gender mutilations in the country, and here's why. So when you and I were growing up, listen, no guy wants to admit this, okay? But any guy who claims to you that when he was in the locker room showering after football practice or after gym class, never checked out and compared himself to the other guys is a liar, all right? But we all knew that, but nobody said anything, right? So back in the day, if you would have said to your buddies, hey man, I noticed another guy's manhood in the locker room, your buddies all would have ragged on you, all right? You would have realized how stupid that sounded and just never brought it up again and gone on with the rest of your life, right? That's how it went when we were growing up. Here's how it goes now. Here's how it goes now. How it goes now is you jump on TikTok and say, hey, is there something wrong with me? That I checked out another guy's manhood in the locker room after class or after practice. Your comments get immediately, the algorithm feeds all these people to come into your comments to convince you one of two things must be true. Okay. Not that you're the 10 billionth young man that's been curious about his anatomy compared to another man's in the history of our society. No, that you must be gay. Or actually, maybe you're a woman trapped in a man's body, and that's why you noticed, and that's why you got a little tingle down the spine there. And then, of course, here's the thing, though, Gary, you don't want to deny this. If you say no, I know that's not it. That same mob online will turn again. What? There's nothing wrong with it. Were you a homophobe? Are you a bigot? Are you a Nazi? Are you a fascist?
Yeah.
And so this becomes a feedback loop of nihilism, right? Okay. I want affirmation. And assistance and guidance and wisdom that I should be getting from my parents, but they're probably detached from me and not paying attention if they're even in the home at all. And so I'm getting this from this amorphous blob online, but that also then means in order to keep getting that affirmation and identity and connection and community I want from them, I have to play now by their rules instead of the rules I was born into in my culture and in my family. And sooner or later, that momentum gets going. You go talk to the school guidance counselor. They, of course, convince you that, yes, of course, you must get these surgeries. And won't I be a hero on the cover of Education Quarterly, okay, with how many young people I've liberated from their cisgendered oppressors. And before you know it, no one wants to step in and say no. And your parents now can't because you live in Colorado or California. They'll throw them in jail if they try, right? And before you know it, you're before a doctor who thinks that Joseph Goebbels just didn't know how to do it right. And he's here to make sure that you are the next patient at the island of Dr. Moreau. And all that energy and all that vibe and all that aura all gets going downhill. All that gravity, that social gravity takes hold of you. And none of the adults in the room, if there are even any, no one has the wherewithal to stop and say, this is retarded. We're not doing this. We're going to stop right now. Okay. Over my dead body. And how many kids ended up getting these surgeries, getting these gene therapies because of the very circumstance that I just articulated right there.
No, you're absolutely right. And, that's one of the things that the left is really good at doing is they start pushing these social contagions, and they're good at silencing people through shame. Like, obviously, if you are going to judge this person or you're going to speak out against this, or my God, you teach your kids what you believe biblically, like you're a homophobe, you're a racist, you're whatever, a Nazi, a fascist, you name it. And then you're the problem, not this insanity that they're pushing on you and making you participate in somebody else's mental illness. And that is one thing that they have done throughout society over the last 30, 40, 50 years, where these absolute perverse ideas, if you don't agree with them, you're the problem. And that's something that, because look, preventing these from spreading at the beginning is a whole lot easier than once we have laws in place and everything else that is now protecting these really bad ideas. That's, prevention is key. And that's something that Americans and conservative Americans need to start speaking out much quicker on these social issues, as to waiting, instead of waiting until next thing you know, their daughter is in a locker room with a boy. That's not when it's time to speak out against this stuff.
Agreed. I would say we've done a fairly good job on this issue, better than any other social contagion from the left. This is my 20th year working full time in politics, and I think people like Liz and others have been very bold in making sure we don't accept their language, don't use their premises, and pushing back on this right from the jump. And I think as a result, you've seen the public polling on this issue radically change in our direction in the last couple of years. You're now seeing some of the very same medical associations who were pushing these macabre and ghoulish practices are now abandoning them, right? And so we've got them on the run here, but we have to defeat this. We have to, and this is something on the right we have not often done very well, which is go all the way to victory. And to me, victory means we have to put the genie back in the bottle, push it back in, kind of that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. All right, when they're trying to close the ark, and then he's like, "Don't look at it, don't look at it." All right, and they're trying to force whatever came out of it back to come back home, back into it, right, and then slam it shut. All right, and then put it in a warehouse to be lost and never found again. That's what we need to do with this. We need to criminalize this, slam that latch on Pandora's box there, and this time go ahead and dry it in raw cement. All right, and then bury it in a hole and throw away the hole. And then we tell those whoever try to bring it back, you're going to join them in that hole. We're never going back ever again to that.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like this, enough is enough. And we've seen the results of this. Everybody can sit back and you can look at what's going on. There's nothing good. We see from a scientific standpoint, a medical standpoint, we're not benefiting from this in society at large. Our kids sure aren't benefiting from this. And I think this is the case is closed. Like we got to quit accepting this nonsense. And I don't know. It takes everybody out there doing it. You can't wait for a politician to do the work for you. As a parent, you got to get involved with your schools. You got to get involved with your communities. And that's where it really starts. You don't want to wait for it to be a national level. And then you decide, you know what, I should start speaking up against this. That's too late.
Amen. Could not have said it better myself.
All right, Steve, listen, we really appreciate you coming on, especially in such short notice. Everyone, go check out the Steve Deace Show. And thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it, buddy.
You bet, Gary. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time. And hope Liz gets better soon. God bless.
All right, you as well. Thank you.
I want to be very clear about what we're facing right now. What we're facing right now is not just a series of political disagreements. We are facing a coordinated effort in our country to reshape our culture, our law, and to redefine truth itself. And most media outlets, as you know, refuse to explain to you just the basics of what actually is happening, much less challenge it when there are people who are dishonest involved in it. Blaze TV exists because someone has to do that work, to bring the truth to light, to untangle the lies. This network is not interested in protecting institutions or parroting narratives. We examine the facts, the documents, the policies, and we show you how ideology becomes law. Every show on Blaze TV is part of that effort and only continues because viewers choose to support it directly. I highly encourage you to subscribe to Blaze TV. You can join today at blazetv.com/Liz and get $20 off right now for as low as $8 a month when you join our annual plan. You can be part of a movement that isn't just watching history, but shaping it for the next generation. That's blazetv.com/Liz, and you get $20 off right now.
All right, so speaking of pushing this trans ideology through politics, here we have Hillary Clinton giving a speech in Munich. Let's take a look at that.
Who's been involved in this work for a long time in trying to explain and truly bring people together around issues of gender, and that's Sarah McBride, U.S. Congresswoman from the state of Delaware. You know, as a gender rights champion and also the first openly transgender member of the United States Congress, you've been on the front lines of this fight, and you've also been on the receiving end of so many threats and attacks that come from, again, in many ways, organized efforts. So when you hear Neil talking about it from a European perspective, although he did bring us in at the end there, Sarah, how do you see it from the United States? And I want to underscore how truly effective Sarah has been in talking with her colleagues, first in the legislature, the state legislature in Delaware, now in Congress, and you have shown immense grace in the face of attacks, even from your fellow members of Congress.
Well, thank you so much for those incredibly kind words. It's an honor to be here with you, Secretary Clinton. It's an honor to be here with another Trailblazer Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi. And of course, it's an honor to be here with my fellow panelists. And the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, as well. Once politicians start naming other politicians in a room, it never stops. There is no question in the United States that after decades of historic progress on gender equality writ large, and specifically more recently on LGBTQ rights, that we are facing, as you mentioned, a well-organized, well-funded, right-wing regressive movement. And they really have placed trans people at the center of that effort, but we should be clear that the consequences of this anti-trans effort, not only out of proximity, but out of intentionality, will include consequences for women of all backgrounds. Because at the end of the day, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, and sexism are all rooted in the same prejudice. The belief that one perception at birth should dictate who you are, how you act, what you do, who you love, and how you dress. And it's why threats toward trans people are threats toward all women. Because when they use trans people as the tip of the spear, when they come after trans people, as they are doing right now, using us as a political wedge issue, using people like me, using me, as you mentioned, as a political pawn, not only are they licensing discrimination against trans people, they're sanctioning gender policing that we know in reality actually disproportionately targets non-transgender women.
All right. So what she wants you to believe is that you're regressive if you think that men are women and women are men. And by the way, it's a women's right issue to let men in women's sports. The next clip that we have is Pete Hegseth talking about the exact same thing. So let's listen to the Secretary of War talk about some of these gender issues and see which one makes more sense to you.
Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. If not, they're not standards. They're just suggestions. Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed. When it comes to combat arms units, and there are many different stripes across our joint force, the era of politically correct, overly sensitive, don't hurt anyone's feelings leadership ends right now. But I look out at this group and I see great Americans. Leaders who have given decades to our great republic at great sacrifice to yourselves and to your families. But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign. We would thank you for your service. The military has been forced by foolish and reckless politicians to focus on the wrong things. In many ways, this speech is about fixing decades of decay. Some of it obvious, some of it hidden. Or as the chairman has put it, we are clearing out the debris. For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We've pretended that combat arms and non-combat arms are the same thing. We've weeded out so-called toxic leaders under the guise of double-blind psychology assessments, promoting risk-averse, go-along-to-get-along conformists instead. You name it, the department did it. Foolish and reckless political leaders set the wrong compass heading, and we lost our way. We became the woke department, but not anymore. This administration has done a great deal from day one to remove the social justice, politically correct, and toxic ideological garbage that had infected our department, to rip out the politics. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it.
All right, so that was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and I'm on his team when it comes to this. Like, we have got to quit buying into this insanity that this gender ideology, this wokeness is good for anybody. It's not good for our society. It's not good for our country. It's definitely not good for our military, and it's being forced upon us and our children, and it has to stop. On a lighter note, did Obama just confirm that aliens are real? Let's take a look at this.
Couple questions here. Are aliens real? They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Now, to be fair, later on, President Obama kind of walked those statements back. You can see this Instagram post. I was trying to stick with the spirit of the speed round, but since it's gotten attention, let me clarify. Statistically, the universe is so vast that the odds are good that there's life out there. But the distances between our solar systems are so great that the chances we've been visited by aliens is low. And I saw no evidence during the presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us. Really. Now, just recently, a whistleblower named David Grush has come forward and does claim that UFOs have been covered up for decades. And by the way, the Trump administration has been briefed on all the above.
I've had actually meetings on it. People that are very smart and very solid have said they believe there is something out there. And, it makes sense that there could be. I've never been convinced, even despite that. I just, for some reason, it's not my thing.
So you think, one, he knows, and two, he's open to transparency on UAPs?
He certainly is very well informed on this issue. Leave it at that. I don't want to get ahead of what the president might want to reveal personally.
There's been a role to cover this up, you're saying, through administrations. And there have been people who have been threatened and told not to testify.
I was physically threatened even before I sent in my Intelligence Community Inspector General report under the previous administration. I actually had to go and seek legal protection that way because I was, literally in fear both professionally and in my personal life.
And when you mentioned in that testimony of recovering the pilots or remains non-human, that's something that you saw as far as the intelligence with your eyes?
Yes. And it is a very uncomfortable, even for me now, as somebody who's seen it, experienced it, even talking about it, because it's so outside a normal person's worldview to understand that there is this biological sentience that have piloted these crafts that don't necessarily look 100% like you and I.
Were there pictures? Were there?
There were. Yes, there were.
When I said from another planet or from outer space, you said we don't know where they're from. Is it interdimensional? What are we talking about?
I've talked to a lot of, I'll call graybeards on the program. That is a subject of hot debate on origin. As a guy trained in physics formally as well in my background, I leave an open mind on what the origin is. Certainly, there is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and they could be coming from elsewhere off Earth, but I don't usually go there because I did not see that data, and I'm not conversant in the high confidence theories that the U.S. government had.
I'm not aware of any remains that the department has. Terrestrial beings or activity or technology.
You say we, the U.S. government knows, but there are many other governments around the world. Do they know?
They have their own programs, and like I said 2.5 years ago, we have been in arms race with our peer competitors, namely Russia and China, and they have their own program.
Go ahead and pause it right there. So there was a couple of interesting points that we have there. Number one, he said he wasn't sure if it was extraterrestrial, interdimensional. And then, of course, now we're getting into this arms race that we potentially have with other countries when it comes to UAP technology, whatever that means. I'd like to hear from you down in the comments. What do you think this is? Is this ET? Is this just advanced government technology? Let us know what you think. You can play.
Able to view a body of intelligence that discussed adversarial programs, and I'll leave it at that.
We've recovered things, you say, bodies and physical remains. Was there a sense that the motive of how they got here, what they were doing, was it peaceful, not peaceful?
We've seen a mixed bag of activity, and motive and intent, why they're visiting, that's once again, that gets into our assessments, not necessarily, we can't quite understand the intent of some of the sentients and why they're visiting. Could it be because we have interesting genetic material on Earth? We're a Jurassic Park tourist attraction for them. Could be a myriad of reasons.
For the other people who are coming out, you say to them what? You've obviously faced intimidation. You talked about harassment. There are reports that others have too.
I say that there's hope. Certainly, Congress values whistleblower information right now. And certainly, I believe there's an appetite with the administration to do the right thing on this as well. And there's some other things that are happening behind the scenes that I'll let the administration discuss when they're ready.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your time, and we'll follow every element. It's fascinating.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. So aliens, are they real? Or is it just one big cover up to hide advanced technology that we have developed by man here on the earth? Again, make sure you guys let us know what you think down in the comments below. That'll be interesting. All right, so just last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio actually had a standing ovation at the security conference in Munich. Let's take a look at what he had to say on this.
But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests.
Yeah, go ahead and pause it right there. So, again, what we're seeing all over the world is, number one, the United States is providing most of the security globally for most of these European countries, and they're outsourcing the cost of that security to the United States. At the same time, they're taking advantage of these trade deals that our politicians are selling us down the river and pushing our production and everything else, our jobs overseas, while we're still responsible for not only the defense of their country, but the cost of that defense as well. Go ahead.
He's a climate cult. We have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now together we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, overused term, would now replace the who settled and built the nation of my birth, arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century served for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own.
All right. So, there again, I think the Secretary of State there just did an excellent job highlighting the fact that Americans are getting screwed time and time again, whether it is energy policy or trade, especially with Europe. Here we have in the United States where we're being forced this green energy scam that is costing us not only a lot more money for energy, but also real jobs here in the United States, while China continues to build coal power plants, and their energy is abundant and cheap. And then Europe is raking us over the coals with these trade deals prior to the Trump administration. Luckily, he's starting to get a handle on some of those things while they're taking advantage of the fact that we're providing their security through our military, through our tax dollars, and through American soldiers out there. Well, folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. My name is Gary Melton, and this is The Liz Wheeler Show.
All right. Make sure you're subscribed. X.com/Liz_Wheeler, YouTube.com/Liz Wheeler. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.